Welcome to the Pelican Brief with your host, David Tapman.
Welcome to the Pelican Brief. I am your host, David Tapman. Our podcast has sort of evolved over time. We are trying different things to respond to our listeners. And we started with reporting news and updates from legislative sessions, from legislative activities. And we are going to continue to do that. And we're going to try to also bring you some guests and some perspectives. And so in season 3, which is what this will be, we are going to talk to some veteran lobbyists about what they think is going on in Louisiana. And specifically in this season, we're going to be talking about the expected special session of the legislature that Governor Jeff Landry has suggested he was going to call in November. Conventional wisdom says it's going to start sometime in early November and end sometime before Thanksgiving. It is a pretty aggressive agenda, outlined as wanting to lower income tax to make it flatter and broader. There are some other elements to it, like the renewal of the 0.45 cent sales tax that currently sunsets in June of 2025, and also some other changes to the laws relative to some constitutional amendments to allow the opening up of Article 7, some taxes on a number of services that you're going to hear us talk about, and various other things. This is a pretty aggressive package that is being proposed by Governor Landry and his Revenue Secretary, Richard Nelson. So one of our first guests in this process is going to be Joe Mapes. Joe Mapes is well known for his work with Farm Bureau and many, many other clients. Joe's been around for longer than I have, which is to say a lot because I'm kind of old and I don't know many people who have been around longer than I have. So we're going to try to have conversations, bring you some perspective. Some people may not like what we say. Some people will definitely not like what we say. But what we're going to try to do is bring information to the forefront, and hopefully there will be a dialogue that'll be created that will help people be better informed and get us through this process in a knowledgeable way. So we're going to break this podcast with Joe up into 2 pieces because our conversation really I feel like it was very good and I didn't want to cut it down. So we're going to now go to part 1 with Joe Mapes. Well, welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us on the Pelican Brief today. We've got a lot going on in the state of Louisiana. I appreciate you being here and talking with us today.
Yes, sir. It's always a pleasure to see my good friend David and to talk about these things that could possibly affect Louisiana coming our way.
No doubt about it. I want to give a little bit of a sort of a plug or I guess a memorial. You know, when I first started in this business, your dad was around and we became friends, and he was just, Bud Mapes should be like etched in the stone of the Capitol because he was literally such a legend. And I can't imagine what it's like following in his footsteps. So just loved your dad. He was a great guy.
Thank you for those comments, and I agree with you.
Yeah, he was great. He was also, as most people who remember, colorful. He always wore the bright ties and all that, but he was a great lobbyist, well respected at the Capitol, and he was at a time when this profession, there was a lot of honor and integrity in the profession, and he helped set the standard for that. So, there's so many people that have, moved along.
Oh,
when we lost Bud, we lost a lot.
Oh, he was an institution, a one-man institution. And at his wake, everybody attended the governor. And back then we had a superintendent of education. Remember, it was Cecil
Right.
Picard.
I remember that, yeah.
President of the Senate was Don Hines. And they all attended. And Sandy had the idea, my wife, to put out a basket of Bud's colorful socks, along with some of his colorful ties and bolos. And so to this day, people in different segments of politics will walk up and pull up their pant leg and show me their pair of socks and go, "Look, I got these at your dad's funeral." So
no, it's Again, like I said, there's a lot of those, Cecil Picard included. Lots of legends at the Capitol. But you know how it works when you go on a couple of years. You don't remember who you are, and it's a lot different down there now. But it's okay. He did good things for the people of Louisiana.
That's right.
So speaking of that, you and I have been talking a lot, sort of off the, not off the record, but off of any sort of media like this, and talking a little bit about this plan that Governor Landry and some legislative leaders are promoting relative to changing the tax structure in Louisiana, modernizing it. There are lots of different parts to it. Obviously, Secretary of Revenue Richard Nelson is the lead on that. And initially, I don't think people were really aware. Saying that you're going to do tax reform sounds good. Reform anything sounds good. But getting down into the details, and I think since this was originally discussed, there have been a lot of concerns, a lot of people who are saying we want the details because details matter. And so this package would really seek to. So in committee this week, in Ways and Means Committee, Secretary Nelson testified that the Tax Foundation, this national watchdog group, said that if all of these proposals passed, we would go from 40th in the nation in tax policy to 8th in the nation in tax policy. So that sounds really good. When we get into the details and we talk about the dollars and where they're going to come from, that's where it gets more where there needs to be a lot more detail and more discussion. So I know you followed it. Talk a little bit about your perceptions, your ideas about what you think about this.
Well, first of all, I would say it's a lot. Secondly, I would say that Secretary Nelson's got some great ideas. We heard him talk about some of them on the campaign trail when he was running for governor. I strongly encouraged him to run for governor and get that message out there. And back to what I just said a minute ago, but it's a lot. And I told him that at the time before he ran for governor. I said, you've got to get out there and get the message going, though, okay, because we do need reform. My concern is, David, is just like the Constitutional Convention that you and I discussed a few months ago, 21 days roughly. If you and I start talking about tax reform right now, that conversation's without a solid guide to that conversation, we're going to have that conversation going 20 different directions within the first few minutes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So what they've been basing a lot of these conversations on, and look, you saw it too, but I'll kind of lead off, is that they keep referring to North Carolina. So in 2013, North Carolina began to implement some of their changes. And a lot of the answers to the questions in Ways and Means Committee discussions, which is where the bill would go,
right,
obviously, or bills. I mean, right now it's 10 bills, and we can get a little bit more in detail on that because we were with Richard yesterday, and he spoke to a group of us and talked about the fact that it might not be 10 bills, that 3 of the bills may be combined into one.
Yeah, I heard there's a second folder of bills coming out, and some of those bills will be revisions of the bills in the first folder.
That's right. And so the other part of that is when the governor calls the session, within his call, he's going to have to open up certain things. So Article 7 of the Constitution, whatever. So, just for our audience, whatever the call indicates, any legislator can file a bill within that subject matter. So it doesn't mean that the governor will have the only bills. And I've heard legislators talk about.
So it's an umbrella category.
It is, and so you open it up, and anybody can file a bill in those categories. But so in North Carolina, they started in 2013, but they kind of bit off a little bit at a time, and they worked over.
And that's my whole point.
Right.
That's my whole point, David. Is that. And again, we had this conversation with the secretary before he ran for governor. He did a great job of selling that package on the road when he was running for governor. It just wasn't his time to be governor just yet. But again, just maybe piecemeal. The best way to eat an elephant is how.
One bite at a time.
And this, my friend, is an elephant.
Yeah.
It truly is.
Yeah, and it's a lot in a short period of time. And so, let's kind of walk through and talk about the different elements. I mean, to me, the biggest element is, and it's not the biggest chunk of money, but the biggest element is that on June 30th of 2025, the 0.45 sales tax is going to roll off. So,
ding, 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 ding.
Right. And so if you do nothing, if the legislature and the governor did nothing, they would have a big budget hole, but taxpayers would get about a $500 million tax cut because.
And why is it rolling off?
Well, it's rolling off because, as you know, it was originally, as I remember, because I'm getting old now, I don't remember things, but originally it was a penny, remember?
Right,
and
yes,
then,
I do.
it sunsetted. And when it sunsetted, they, I believe there were a couple of shots at it, but Paula Davis had the bill to make it 0.45, but many of the Republicans were the ones who really didn't like a sales tax increase at all. Their agreement to do that was based on the fact there would be a sunset and that sunset would be in 2025. And so it clearly is, you can couch it the way you want, but so remember, in the administration's package, it's not a renewal of it, it's an elimination of the sunset, which makes it permanent. And so that's kind of a big deal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that anybody's noticing too much, that tax is on the rolls and that it's affecting their daily lives. But the commitment was there from a couple of legislative bodies so far. And I understand that we've got a $900 million revenue shortfall next year, roughly. And if that's the case, where are you going to get that new revenue? And I'm going to tell you right now, nobody asks me, but if they did, I'd say, what's wrong with the Stelly plan? Mm-hmm. That's $400 million a year that if we go back in time and add that up to today's deficit, I'm not going to say it's going to add up to the penny, but it's going to come close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I agree. So that's the first one. And the administration's saying it's $450 million. Richard told us yesterday that sometime in the next week or so, that the fiscal office is going to come out and put amounts on that. I think it's closer to $500 million now, just with inflation and some of the things that have happened. So the next piece is, and again, kind of walking through this in an order of what I would consider to be importance. The next piece is that next year, it is very likely that the Budget Stabilization Fund, which is a fund that we put aside money for budgets to kind of help with our budget so we don't have any major crisis, because unlike the feds, we can't print money. We have to actually have a balanced budget every year.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that, but it is true, and it's a good thing. But if because the Budget Stabilization Fund is going to hit a certain level, there was a provision put in by the Republicans that said that if the Budget Stabilization Fund reached a certain amount of a percentage of the entire state's revenue, that Louisiana taxpayers would have a reduction in their income tax. And so what it also looks like is that on June 30th next year, that Louisiana residents will get that income tax reduction if the legislature does nothing. Mm-hmm. And that is, we were told it's $300 million.
Wow.
So that's another $300 million tax cut that the people of Louisiana get if we do nothing, right?
But that adds to the state's deficit.
It does. And that's why they're talking around $900 million. I mean, it's funny how, we used to say $1 million here, $1 million there.
Right.
Eventually we'll start talking about real money. Now we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, the budget has expanded so much over the past few decades. It's insane.
And a lot of that's in the healthcare arena.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, you look at when Buddy Romer was here, I think it was somewhere around $12 million.
Yeah.
And that was including DHH.
Right.
And now, we're going to get off into a rabbit hole here, but, a lot of people's thinking is, well, we can't afford to give up that 3-to-1 money.
Yeah.
We've got to come up with that one of the ratio. Louisiana's got to have their own money to get the matching funds from the feds at 3-to-1, but that's to me, that's what's gotten us in the hole over there, is just continuing to go after that carrot on a stick.
Right.
You know.
So those are the two big things that I wanted to bring up because in essence, if we did nothing, I keep saying that, if the legislature and the governor
Right.
were unable to pass anything or unable to do anything, what they would have to do is do some pretty major cuts. And I don't think anybody is for that. And I agree with you. I think the 0.45, I never had a single one of my clients go, oh my God, I'm paying 0.45 more in sales taxes, not a single one.
Right.
I don't have an issue with that. And if you just passed that, if you didn't put all the accoutrement on it, you would be able to take $500 million out of that deficit. And again, I don't have an issue with it. I don't know how the rest of the state feels. I know that there are some Republican legislators that ran on getting rid of that. And so it's going to be interesting because you're going to need every Republican vote
Yes.
in order to pass that, because it's a 2/3 vote, right? It's going to be kind of a big deal. So that's kind of where we are. So let's talk now. Let's get into some of the things that are in the package that would be the restructure. So they push really hard on the income tax piece to say that we're out of line in how we pay income taxes, and what they would like to do is to reduce state income taxes across the board to 3%. I believe that's the number. Is it 3 or
Yes,
3
yes.
and a half? It's 3, huh?
It's 3. That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's right. And so, and in order to do that, that's part of the reason they would pass the 0.45, and part of the reason that they would make an adjustment to the reduction in income tax, because you see, we're already going to have a reduction in income tax, but I don't think it affects all brackets. And in this case, I think they want to make it flat, and they want to make it broader, which is not that big of an issue. There was a little research that I saw the other day. I can't remember. I'll try to cite it in the show notes, but it said that 60% of the people in Louisiana pay 3.5% or less in income tax. So it will affect 40% of the population, but it won't. You have some people, I think the highest rate is 7.5. I think that's right. Again, not an expert here, but just try to listen a lot and take notes.
Right.
But I believe that's the highest rate. And so that would come down. But in order to pay for that, you've got the taxes that we talked about. You probably have to do something with the budget stabilization fund provision. There, by the way, are going to be constitutional amendments that are going to have to be passed in order for all of this to work. What Richard said yesterday, and he said that...
I had that question yesterday, and I forgot to call somebody and ask him. I said, it was like a light went off in my head. I was driving down the road, and I go, wait a minute. They got to have a 2/3 vote. And folks, anybody that's listening, that's an apple to an orange when you're talking about a simple, majority vote in the House.
Well, in today's environment, it's
Senate.
Monumental.
Yes,
right?
it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, because you have to protect every vote, and look, clearly when I've talked to all legislators, but when you talk to legislators who come from some of the more high poverty areas, sales taxes, they believe disproportionate because it's a disproportionate part of your income, and so
they're still going to have to pay the same for
right.
on a toothpaste that you and I do or anybody else does. And you may have lowered their income taxes, but how much?
Yeah, and a lot of those people who are in the poor areas, there's going to be no change to their income tax because they're paying 3.5% or less. Right. And so let's talk about some of the proposals. So what do you want to talk about? Service taxes first, about the fact that they're going.
Yeah. Can you define that for me, please?
Yeah. So the service taxes, as I understand it, are that, and I'll give you the example that was used a while back by Richard, and it's a good example. So when and we're old enough to remember this, but when you used to go to Blockbuster and you would rent a tape,
right?
That's awful that I'm saying that, but
people don't know what a tape is. It was a way of watching a movie.
Yeah,
back then.
you'd rent a movie. Well, when you rented that movie, you paid sales tax on that, right? You paid, but it's no longer sales, right? It's services. So when sales taxes were originally envisioned, our economy was 2/3 goods and 1/3 services. What's changed, right? And so now it's really flipped. And so we have a lot more services and we really don't tax those. Not that I'm an advocate for it, but in the context of the conversation about the movie, now it's streamed to our house. Now it's you no longer pick up the tape, it just comes over the internet. And then of course you've got the internet. So digital goods are no longer digital goods. They're digital services, because you don't rent. I mean, you don't buy it's called a streaming service, right? So YouTube, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm in the film industry, so I don't want to get in trouble. But, those are some of the services. But there's a lot of other services. So, car washes. And I bring.
Well, what about lobbyists? And this past Thursday, I was testifying in committee at the state capitol in Baton Rouge. Chairman Troy Romero said, when I sat down, Mr. Mapes, will you please identify yourself in the microphone and tell us why you think we're here today? And I said, yes, sir, I will. I'm Joe Mapes. I'm the lobbyist for the Farm Bureau Federation. I'm here today. No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I said, we'll have to cut that part out. I said, hey, I'm Joe Mapes. I am here for the Farm Bureau Federation of Louisiana, and I'm the legislative specialist, and I am not a lobbyist. And you know what? Somebody, a legislator, immediately turned to me and said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll get you."
Yeah.
And he's right. But the thing is, and it's a cute story, but how do you really define service? And it's like a slippery eel. Are we going to turn everybody away from being this service and they're providing the same services, but they're called something else to try and dodge the tax?
Well, and look, I asked the question of Richard yesterday. I said, so tell me about the lobbyist tax. He said, well, it's popular. I said, okay, so yeah, we're going to go get them. What about lawyers? Are you going to put lawyers in there? And he kind of shook his head, and that's not going to happen.
Right.
But you know how much he said that he thinks that generates in taxes? $1 million. And I won't even argue that. I don't know what people get paid. I don't know how much they get paid. But I asked him the question then. I said, so I'm going to leave his name out. But how do you tax Joe Blow, who is the executive director of the Widget Association, who does education, he does outreach, he does economic development, he runs a group self-insurance fund, he runs all of these other things, and oh, by the way, he's registered as a lobbyist. I asked Kyle Ruckert the same thing, and he said there'll be people to figure that out, and pretty much the same question, except for Richard said, well, that's what we have auditors for. So get ready to be audited.
Okay.
But, in the end, you if you really want to broaden the tax, if you want to make it, and look, my daughter's an attorney. I think we ought to tax the attorneys, but here's the problem. When you tax them.
No, you can't exclude one professional service over another.
So the real question for us is we don't pay that tax. Our clients do. And so I guess I guess my point is businesses hire us. I mean, it's businesses. I mean, you've got a really good book of business and you represent all kinds of different people. I do too. I have corporate clients. So they pay it.
Right.
Is that what we're trying to encourage business?
That's a unique way to look at it, but you're putting more tax on business.
That's right. And
ultimately.
Yeah. So I would also tell you, and I think you know this, and I know a lot of legislators listen to this, if you go in and look at the definition of lobbying and what it is, we only have bills for less than 6 months out of the year. And so the rest, if we don't have a bill and we're not going on some big campaign, are we actually lobbying in that? And how do you do that breakdown? Richard said that, and it's a good point. Look, smartest guy I know.
He's brilliant.
Yeah. And he said, well, when you place that, you have to say how much you lobby if you're a corporation for tax purposes, right? Well, when a corporation does that, they take the whole amount that they pay us, right?
Right.
We don't lobby 100% of the time. A lot of times we're working on relationships. How many times do you visit with a legislator and a member and you talk about their kids playing ball and, you don't even bring up any issues?
As many times as I can,
yeah,
without ever bringing up an issue. That's how I want to be with a legislator or
right.
any elected official. I want to have that type of relationship that we're more concerned about each other and what's going on in each other's lives, and then we can always get to business.
Right. And again, I think people think we take people out to big dinners and they vote with us. That's not how it works, right?
If our job were that easy, everybody would be a lobbyist.
Yes, that's true.
If all I had to do was take somebody else's money and contributions and expense account and apply it to a body,
right.
and that body, once I deliver that from the first group, is going to do whatever I want, everybody would be in line to have our profession. And for anybody out there listening, It's not that easy.
Well,
and I'm not complaining. I love it. But
yeah.
I'm just saying it's not what a lot of people think it is.
No, it's for every minute we spend at the rail, we spend an hour doing other stuff to prepare for that.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We make it look easy.
Oh, that's true.
When we walk into a committee room and the vote comes out unanimously and the witness was treated very well, okay? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't by accident.
Right.
It didn't just happen in the middle of the meeting. You know?
And it's communication and education and letting people know what's really happening and so on and so forth. So
100%.
Look, I think I was with a group of my colleagues last night, and we talked about it. I mean, look, if that's what they want to do, then they can do it. We don't pay it. Now, we do have to set up a tax account and with the state to send that money in when we receive it.
So we're going to be like the sheriff, of the parish.
That's right. That's exactly right. And of course,
that's okay. We'll get little badges.
Well, when the auditors come in, I want to make sure that my books, I have a lobby set of books, and then I have funny. Because we do association management,
right.
We do all kinds of education,
business consulting,
and training. Yeah, we do strategic planning, retreat. We do all kinds of different things. We do it under one umbrella. And
right.
what lobbyists are going to have to do is go out if they're doing any of those other services, or if an individual person like that is the executive director of a large organization is registered as a lobbyist, which most are, just in the event that they actually do something that constitutes lobbying. That's a very small part of their time, and it's going to be interesting to see how the auditors go out and do the gotcha thing, because it creates an environment where you could have someone direct their Department of Revenue to say, go get that lobbyist, right?
Right.
It becomes more like the federal government,
right.
because I don't like what they said or what have you. But so there are some other things that I do find interesting. And so lawn service, if someone cuts your grass, you're now going to have to pay tax. I mean, right?
Right.
So what happens if you're an individual? So I just don't know the answer to this, but let's just say I'm David Tapman. I'm getting old, and I am David Tapman and getting old, and I want to hire somebody to cut my grass. Do I then become a tax submitter, or do they?
Well, the lobbyists do. You just said it yourself. Yeah. So I think each resident needs to set up their own tax account to pass on those taxes.
So a young kid, my son did it. A young kid goes out and starts cutting grass, use dad's lawnmower, paid, in his trimmer and whatever, and gets paid, well, when I did it, it was like $5, but because I did that, right? But they go out and start doing that. Does that college student now become a tax reporter? So there's really some interesting parts of that. Haircuts, right? Your barber is going to have to start
right.
doing that. He made a good point on the car wash thing, but I still don't know that I buy into it because, but if you in the old days, it was a car wash, you'd hire somebody to come do it, or you do it yourself. So now you have, and I'm going to give them a plug because I pay them a lot of money, but I really like them, Benny's car wash.
Right.
I pay a subscription. So now that subscription is going to be taxed. And so when you start adding all that up, what does it become? If I have, I don't remember, but I think I pay about $100 for YouTube TV a month. So 4% a month, $4, it becomes $40-something. So you take all of those little issues, all those things that are going to be taxed. I think tattoo parlors are going to be taxed. I don't have any tattoos, but I feel for those people.
Tanning salons are going to be taxed.
Oh, yes, that's right. That actually was addressed, and the question came up. And some of the arguments on
one of the answers given that, hey, listen, these types of services aren't afforded by people in lower income brackets. They're only afforded by people in, higher income brackets. And so we're not hurting anybody. These are basically, and they didn't say this, but aren't they implying that these are basically luxury taxes?
Yeah, the thing that was interesting to me, and maybe I'm just missing this, I say it all the time, I'm a John Curtis graduate, I'm not that smart, but the part that a lot of the arguments on that has been made on let's just take car wash and lawn service. Well, you have the option to cut your own grass, so you don't have to pay the tax if you want. You just cut your own grass, and so it's no big deal. But you can't cut your own hair. You can't put your own tattoo on. I mean, maybe you can. I can't. It would be awful. So I don't, not
and continue to be accepted in society.
Yes, that's right. Piercing or whatever else it's going to be. Right. But those are just a few of them.
That's a great example, though.
So we were told yesterday, the group it generates $600 million. So you put the $500 million of the 0.45 You take the $300 million of the potential reduction in income taxes.
Tax, correct.
And you put $600 million on top of that. You're at $1.2 billion in tax increases. It's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. By the way, it could be higher because there's some other issues that I want to talk to you about because you're more of an expert in this than, I mean, you're an expert in all of this, but the cleaning of the pennies. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. And so just so our audience understands, most people understand this, but I believe so we have 4.45% sales tax in the state of Louisiana. And the only clean part of it, I'm going to call it clean, that has no exemptions whatsoever is the 0.45, as I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. There's 4 cents that has exemptions within those pennies. So let's pretend, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but if you want to buy bait for crawfish, you're a commercial crawfisherman, you don't pay a portion of those taxes. I don't know it exactly, but apparently in those 4 cents, there's 225 exemptions. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's what...
That sounds accurate from what I remember from a few years back.
Right. So 225 exemptions, which means that certain people, if they go and buy something, they would only pay 0.45 because that's the only clean penny. And some of them may pay 1.45 or 2.45 because they're only exempt on the 2 pennies. But a lot of those exemptions on those pennies go to some of the people who I believe, from an industry standpoint, most need it, right?
Yes, and I think farming and agriculture is the best one to look at. These exemptions were put on nationwide in statute and in constitutions many years ago because they were needed. Okay, and they're still needed to keep our state competitive with other states, and not because they've got similar tax structures for farmers there. So to tinker with those, it's a delicate balance, but there's one in there, David, called the agricultural use value tax. And what that says is that agricultural land is assessed at a lower rate than commercial land, for example. And it's assessed at a much lower rate. And it's in the Constitution because it is so delicate, because the farmer is tied to the land. So if the land taxes go up too high and then their input prices go up too high, they're going to end up going out of business because farmers are price takers. They're not price makers. And what that means is whatever the market is willing to pay for their harvest, okay, for their commodity, that's what they get. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if they get more taxes put on them, or more fees put on them, or they can't pass that on. They can't pass that on to the consumer. They can't pass that on, like we were talking about a second ago, that other taxes would be passed on to, the businesses and industries that we represent. Right. We wouldn't be able to do that. So that is on the table, okay, for being moved into statute. And you said you were there for a long time yesterday at the committee listening to this. The justification is, well, we just want to make it easier so we don't have to have a constitutional convention every time to address these issues. So we put it in the statute. Still going to take a 2/3 vote, okay? But we don't have to have on that piece of legislation, whatever part of the Constitution it changes. But we just don't have to open the Constitution up, the entire Constitution, and have a constitutional convention. Great point. So who are you doing that for? Because are you telling us that you want to come and get our exemption money right now, tax us at a higher rate right now? Because if that's what you tell, and no, that's not us. We just want so is it for the future? Because we trust this current body of legislators and this, this administration. No, we do. But it's the future ones right. that we have to be concerned about, right?
That's right.
And we don't know what's coming, and don't think it's not possible for a George Soros Foundation or another a similar organization to infiltrate politics to the degree that we wake up one day and say, holy shit, what happened here in Louisiana? It's very possible. They put a guy and some waiters with a fly fishing rod in a beautiful creek on an ad on TV a few years back in Georgia, and he won the ag commissioner because he looked like an ag commissioner. He was sold as an ag commissioner. This guy was not friendly to agriculture, and that's where I'll stop. But my point is, everybody woke up in that state and were surprised that this man had won Commissioner of Agriculture. And so we have to think about the future. And if they're not wanting to make it easier to get to, those exclusions and those exemptions now, then they have to be doing it for the future.
Right.
And if they're doing it for the future, that's of great concern to us.
Well, and look, I, have some. I'm not a farmer. I do keep a garden. I think
I do too, but I don't get any exemptions.
I don't either, and I don't need any. But the farmers are so critically important to all of us, to America, right? We are a nation rich in agriculture, but we're losing farmers, we're losing farms, we're losing farmland, and the reality of it is that we just what was a hurricane? Was it Ida that just hit, or what was the one that just hit?
You had Ida a couple of years back.
Okay.
And then you had Milton, and then you had
the one right before it. Yeah. So I know there was some
Helene.
damages to some of our crops, because I was talking to a farmer that I know.
Right.
And he said that his soybean crop, he's in South Louisiana, was completely wiped out. And I said, well, do you have crop insurance for that? He goes, yes, but it only pays 50%. And so, how do you stay in business if you got completely wiped out in your investment and you only got 50% of that back? Their margins are not great, right? They have good years and bad years. So in the good years, they got to put away money for the bad years. But I didn't even talk to a sugarcane farmer, but I got to imagine a lot of that cane was knocked down.
It was laying down. Yeah. That's right.
Which really reduces, even if they can harvest it, it really reduces the sugar content in the sugarcane. So. Supporting our farmers is such a critical part of, and look, so from an agriculture, from farmland to growing things, to our crawfishermen, to anybody who's out there in any sort of way working in that where they are already limited on the edges. And it's crazy you brought that up. I forgot about it. You don't set your price. Like you and I can set our price, and if somebody doesn't pay it, we just say, good, go somewhere else.
No, the market sets the farmer's price.
Sets it, and it's dependent on so many other variables that they can't.
They're the biggest gamblers that there are. They're gambling that there's going to be rain, that there's going to be the right amount of rain. They're gambling that their new hybrid crop is going to grow. They're gambling that no restrictions or regulations are going to come down on them. And it goes on and on and on. They've got all the concerns of a typical business or industry or profession, but then they've got to add those, what I just added, and many more onto that list of concerns.
So, if I were king, I would probably try to clean a penny maybe, but I certainly wouldn't go in and try to clean 4. You know what I mean? It just seems like a lot all at once. But I'm not king, but making some incremental progress in terms of how we do our tax structure, and maybe if you clean some pennies, you could reduce the number of pennies that you charge. So if you incrementally changed cleaned up some of those pennies, maybe it's not 0.45, maybe it's 4.45, maybe it's 3.12.
Right. That's right.
So and then it's real taxes, right? And so I think, again, they didn't call me when they put the package together. No, they didn't. I don't know why.
You know what my slogan is at Mapes and Mapes? It's if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
I like it.
We weren't called either. Yeah. And we're on the menu too. So and it's like I told my client though, don't take it personally. It's not being targeted as an industry or profession. This is their strategy. To put everything in there and then move forward with it.
Yeah, look, I admire the fact that they're trying to come in and make changes.
As well as I.
Now, I think there are some other changes we could make that have nothing to do with taxes that would be bigger impact, but we'll talk about those in a few minutes. There's another pretty big part of this package, and that is the elimination of a broad range of tax credit programs. So take, for example, the 2 largest ones are the motion picture film tax credit. I think it's called the motion picture investor tax credit. And it provides, when someone comes in and does a production, they get pre-approved. And then after they spend all of their money, they can get a credit. And so that's one. The Quality Jobs Program is a big program that has been very successful. Ironically, I helped pass that a long time ago. It was a one-off, where we get hired to come in and do some work to try to get a great program. It's been incredibly successful, and I know a lot of people are kind of rolling over in their skin. But I'll give you one that I think is really important, and it's very small in the big picture, but it's really important, and that is the historic tax credit. It's not, people might think that they just go to New Orleans or to Baton Rouge or to Alexandria and do that, but you got little main streets all over Louisiana that are rebuilding their main streets, trying to bring economy and to bring investment into their communities, and it's been a very effective program.
Well, and those little cities need life.
That's right.
They need them. And so what you're saying is that tax program, what incentive or rebate or whatever, is gone beyond paying for itself.
Well, and I'll give you an example. So I know that I represent the motion picture industry,
Yes.
and so in Louisiana, and I lead that effort. You're talking 12,000 jobs in that program. Now, does that mean if they get rid of it, all 12,000 are gone? No, probably 10. So you're going to pass a part of this that says you're going to build jobs because your tax system is going to be better, but yet you're going to lose maybe 8, 9, 10,000 jobs. The Quality Jobs program, I think, is so good because it really incentivizes employers to make their employees better. And now I'm going to kind of go off a little bit and say this. When I was on the school board, and as you know, I served on the school board for 12 years, one of the things that I was told...
God bless you.
Yeah, well, I need it. I'm still in rehab, so... but I did...
PTSD.
I did go see all my friends the other day, and God, I miss them. I love them. They're so great.
The people always are. That's not the problem. It's
And
the
I love the
process.
kids. Look, it was a great experience. It took years off my life and points, but I was always told when I was being lobbied on issues,
right,
where they said, "Oh my God, this is when companies come in. Education's number one." Okay, so that's number one. What I've heard lately from the procurement work I do, which is a different thing than my lobbyist work, where companies call me and say, how do I build a data center in North Louisiana? How do I come in and build a facility where we're going to do a phone center or whatever? I use those as just a couple of examples because those just happened in the last 6 months. They say to me, wow, I didn't realize insurance was that expensive. And what they often tell me is people pay, almost always, it's double what any other states pay. So you have a big operation out of Dallas, Texas, let's say, and they want to come in. It's just a real story. Dallas, Texas, they want to come in. They want to be in North Louisiana because the insurance for the property is a little bit less because it's further
of the
off
wind
the
zones.
coast, right?
Yeah, right.
We don't have this. We don't have the electricity infrastructure for them, and so that's going to have to be built out. But the reality of it is they're like, wow. So all of my employees I'm going to have to give them a raise just to cover the cost of insurance or private school. And oh, by the way, when I come there, we've got some of the worst roads in the country. We've got not a qualified, educated workforce. And so those things seem to be, to me, like when all of that was going on with me at the school board, never was tax policy a part of what people came to me and said, we want to do this in Baton Rouge, except for ITAP. So you had people who would come in and everybody got it. I think I voted against one the whole time I was on the board.
The industrial tax exemption program.
That's right. And I'm glad you pointed that out. And it is a program by which if industry comes into a particular area, that governmental entity has the ability. The state makes the recommendation. They apply through the state. And then the state votes for it, and then recommendation goes, and now there is local input. So the locals can go in, and it's an 80% reduction now. When I first started on the school board, it was 100%. Now it's 80%, and the idea is that for a certain period of time, depending on how that ITEP is set up, usually I think it's 10 years.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And they do not have to pay taxes on 80% of their investment. So the value of the property, the value of the buildings they put up, the values of machinery and equipment. That's the way I understand
That's right.
it.
That's right.
And so, that's there. That was the one
They
thing.
basically get a tax break to build a plant, in a parish, for example, that's going to benefit the community. Roads get improved.
Right. And there used to be a job requirement that has been removed, and it's probably a good idea because it's hard to project what it is. But the reason I like ITAP, and I think it's a good program, and again, I did vote against one and got beat up pretty badly, but it was a bad ITAP. But the reason I like it is because people come in and they put value where there is or little value now. So you have a piece of land, you have 100 acres, it's empty right now. You're getting basically a rural tax collection on it. So these people say, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to put $100 million into that 100 acres. And what I hope is that when I leave it, it has created value that after my ITEP is done, where I get that 80% tax break, it'll all be there for the rest of however long the life of that program is. And so those are the things that really draw people to the state of Louisiana. But this package doesn't really address anything that the major issues that companies are talking about when they're thinking about coming to Louisiana.
No, I agree with that. You got to take all of that into consideration.
That was a really great conversation with Joe Mapes, and we have another part of it, a second half of it, that we will have in our next episode. But until then, if you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us at Pelican Brief 225. That's on all the major social media platforms. If you'd like to watch us on YouTube, you can find us on YouTube at The Pelican Brief 225. You can always email me at david@pelicanbriefpodcast.com. And we are always interested in hearing from our folks who are listeners. And until next time, we are The Pelican Brief.
The Pelican Brief is an off-script production.